Good morning everyone and welcome to the Cabinet meeting. I'm Councillor Amanda Hopgood, Leader of Durham County Council and Chair of this meeting. The meeting is being broadcast live through our YouTube channel, and before we commence with today's formal business, I'd like to cover some of the housekeeping issues for us all to follow. If you could please switch off or make silent your mobile phones and keep microphones switched off at all times unless invited to speak by myself as the Chair. When invited to speak, please switch on the microphone nearest to you and introduce yourself. So with that, we'll move to the agenda. Item 1 is public questions. We haven't received any public questions for today's meeting. Item 2, minutes. Can I have a mover and seconder, please, for the minutes of the meeting on the 13th of December?
Thank you, Chair. I move those minutes. Thank you.
Councillor Shield, seconder, please.
I second the minutes, Chair.
Thanks. Councillor Scott, seconded. Can we agree the minutes are a correct record? Okay, I can confirm the minutes have been agreed. Item 3, declarations of interest. Are there any declarations from members today, please? No. Okay, so move on to item 4, is the medium-term financial plan 2024-25 to 2027-28 and the revenue budget for 24-25. I can ask Paul Darby, the Corporate Director of Resources, to present the report, please.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, members. This report presents the Cabinet with an update on our medium-term financial plan forecasts covering the period 24-25 to 27-28. It builds on the previous 2 reports considered by Cabinet in July and October last year as we build up towards the budget and MTFP setting process next month. This is not the final budget report. No final decisions have been made today in terms of council tax setting, and the report does not include details of the capital programme or any of the other key budget setting decisions that we'll need to make next month. Those are matters reserved for February Cabinet and Council meetings. The report provides an overview of the autumn statement announcements on the 22nd of November and details of the provisional local government finance settlement, which was published on the 18th of December last year, and the impact on our financial forecasts as a result. Significantly, the report also includes an overview of the comprehensive consultation on the Council's budget proposals as outlined in the previous 2 reports considered by Cabinet, and includes the outcome of a review of the council tax empty property premium section 13A relief policy, seeking Cabinet approval to the updated policy, which is attached to Appendix 5. Appended to the report is an updated MTFP model showing an updated forecast over the next 4 years, including the impact of the local government finance settlement, a range of additional budget pressures that have needed to be accommodated, and some additional savings proposals that have been developed. At paragraphs 45 to 61, there is a detailed overview of the autumn statement, the subsequent policy statement published by the Government, and the provisional local government finance settlement published on the 18th of December, where in overall terms, the position for the Council is worse than we were previously forecasting for 24-25, due to some unexpected significant reductions in the services grant, which has been used to fund expected increases in our revenue support grant and social care grant. Despite significant lobbying from the Council and across the wider sector, no new additional funding over and above that which was announced in the 2022 autumn statement was made available in the 2023 autumn statement, with all of the fiscal headroom available to the Chancellor of the Exchequer having been utilised for tax reductions and new incentives for business instead of further investment in public services. We have once again received a 1-year settlement, and there remains significant uncertainty beyond 24-25, with more difficult financial settlements widely expected from 25-26 onwards, when the Chancellor will be faced with some very tough choices over taxation levels and public expenditure, given the level of borrowing nationally at this time and the wider economic performance. As part of the 2023 autumn statement, the Chancellor reiterated the plan to retain public sector spend in line with the previous commitments, which would likely lead to grant reductions or grant freezes at best for unprotected government departments like local government. Whether this is feasible and the impacts of this acceptable remains to be seen, with many commentators, including the Office for Budget Responsibility and the Institute for Fiscal Studies, questioning the ability of local government to accommodate any return to austerity measures from 25-26 onwards. The autumn statement did confirm the national living wage increase that will be applied from April 24, which is in line with what we were previously forecasting. Alongside the provisional settlement, the Government also published updated core spending power calculations. In calculating this, the government has assumed that all councils raise their council tax by the maximum permissible without a referendum. The settlement confirmed the announcements made in the autumn statement the previous year, where the council tax referendum limit was retained at 2.99%, and next year the council also has the additional flexibility to levy an adult social care precept of 2%. The England average increase in core spending power is 6.5%. In Durham, the government figures forecast the position to be 6.6%, slightly above the national average. But this assumes the council applies a 4.99% increase in council tax and includes some specific grant funding that does not help the council balance its budget. It also includes a government expectation of a £3 million increase in our council tax base next year, which is more than 3 times the level that will actually be in place next year. Every 1% of council tax increase equates to about 0.5% increase in the council's core spending power. So the major element of the core spending power increase is in fact an ability for the council to levy additional council tax charge. Members will see that the core spending power per dwelling in Durham remains below the national average, and if we were funded in line with the national average, the council will receive an extra £42 million of funding next year. This is particularly disappointing given the levels of deprivation and need for support of vulnerable households across the county. At paragraph 66, we have set out details of all the changes made to the financial model assumptions that were factored into the October Cabinet report. In total, our base budget pressures next year, which must be accommodated in order to set a balanced budget, total nearly £48.3 million. For paragraph 67, we've set out details of the proposed minor changes to the profile and the savings previously published, and details of some additional savings proposals for neighbourhoods and climate change totalling £498,000, and for resources totalling £412,000, which have been developed since the previous report was considered. Appendix 3 includes a full updated schedule of all the savings proposals at this stage. In paragraphs 72 to 182, there is a very detailed overview of the consultation undertaken across the autumn of last year, which was done in 2 phases based on the July and the October Cabinet reports. Corporate Review and Scrutiny Management Board will meet to consider this report tomorrow. The feedback received must be taken on board when Cabinet consider what proposals to ultimately take forward to Council on the 28th of February. Cabinet will note that there is a genuine appreciation of the difficulties we face in balancing our budgets and some conflicting and opposing views, which is only to be expected on some of the proposals across different stakeholder groups. Given our financial position, none of the proposals previously considered have been withdrawn at this stage. In total, the MTFP savings proposals now total 16.24 million, with just under 8 million at 7.964 million considered to be achievable in 24-25. The updated MTFP model at Appendix 2 is predicated on the equivalent of a 4.99% increase in council tax next year, and that's in line with the government's expectations and what they have factored into core spending power calculations. A failure to increase the council tax next year would increase the budget deficit to just under £20 million in 24-25, and would not be a strategy that I would recommend to council, as it would create a significant and unwarranted budget challenge. Every 1% of council tax increase generates £2.65 million of additional resources to help the council balance its budget, or to put it another way, if the council does not maximise its council tax raising capacity, then the budget deficit would grow by £2.65 million for every 1% below the threshold set out and assumed by government. It is for these reasons that, as a Section 151 officer for the authority, I recommend to Cabinet and to Council that the increases factored into the MTFP forecasts are given very serious consideration, and the impacts of not doing so are taken on board. Assuming the Council increased the council tax in line with the financial modelling included in this report, and the savings as amended are ultimately taken, then the budget deficit will be £6.447 million next year and £42.183 million over the next 4 years. The Council is therefore faced with needing to utilise just under £6.5 million of its MTFP support reserve to balance its budget next year and defer that deficit into 25-26, where the challenge in terms of balancing that year's budget will be around £20 million. Achieving savings of that magnitude and in the context of the risks outlined in paragraph 187 will be a significant undertaking and requires some very tough choices to be made, with inevitable impacts on staffing levels and service delivery to come. Utilising £6.5 million of reserves to balance the budget next year is not a long-term sustainable budget strategy and comes on the back of using £10 million of reserves in the current year. Using reserves does not address the underlying base budget deficit and will only help buy the Cabinet and officers the time to develop more sustainable budget solutions to be implemented from 25-26 onwards. Chair, the recommendations are set out at paragraph 42 to the report. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. Can I invite Councillor Richard Bell, Deputy Leader and Cabinet Portfolio Holder for Finance, to move the report, please?
Thank you, Chair. Can I thank the officers for this report, which provides a comprehensive overview of the announcements made in the Autumn Statement in November and the Provisional Local Government Finance Settlement in December, and exemplifies the outcomes for this Council, providing updated financial forecasts for next year and the following 3 years. This is the third report we have considered on MTFP 14 this Council year as we build up to the budget setting process next month. The updated figures include provision for increased inflationary pressures, including the impact of CPI and the national living wage increases next year, which have a significant bearing on our adult social care contracts in particular. As one would expect, the cost pressures in adult and children's social care, which are by far the largest budgets the Council has, are enormous. The cost pressures in these two areas, excluding pay inflation, total £23.6 million next year. The additional revenue generated from an adult social care precept of £5.3 million and specific grant funding for these areas falls well short of the cost pressures we face, in part due to our low tax raising capacity, which is a matter I've consistently raised with government. In overall terms, we face spending pressures totalling £48.3 million next year, which includes around £14.9 million pressure for pay inflation, with £3.7 million of this relating to the shortfall in the current budget following the local government pay award this year. Every 1% on our direct pay bill roughly equals 1% on the council tax. While the Autumn Statement announcements at the Local Government Finance Settlement confirmed the additional investment announced in the budget in 2022, which is to be welcome, no further funding was provided. Though this was in line with our MTFP assumptions, it was very disappointing given the lobbying that had been undertaken by this Council and many local government organisations, which we had expected to make some difference. The Provisional Local Government Finance Settlement actually provided around a £1.8 million reduction in funding compared with our previous forecasts due to some unexpected greater cuts in the services grant. We've submitted a very robust response to the Provisional Settlement, setting out our concerns in this regard, as have all other councils, I understand, and we will need to see whether that position changes when the final settlement is published next month. The core spending power increase of 6.6% for this council is misleading for the reasons explained by the Corporate Director, and also falls significantly short of the spending pressures we face, which are a combination of demand for social care services and inflationary costs, which outstrip CPI. It's equally disappointing that we still lag behind the national average core spending power per dwelling, mainly due to our low inherent tax raising capacity. The financial uncertainty from 25-26, particularly over government funding, continues to make medium-term financial planning very difficult. And depending how things turn out, there are significant further challenges to come in 25-26 and beyond. And this is something that we must plan for. The financial modelling included in this report assumes we implement all of the savings that were set out in the previous reports and which have been subject to consultation, together with about £900,000 of additional savings proposals across neighbourhoods and climate changes and resources directorates. The report includes the detail of the comprehensive consultation that has been undertaken, and I'd like to thank everyone involved in that consultation exercise. The feedback we've received is set out in detail in the report and will be taken into account when we finalise and ultimately deliver any of those savings proposals. Should all the savings developed to date ultimately be agreed next month, the total identified savings across the MTFP 14 planning period would be £16.24 million, with £7.96 million, just under half, falling into next year. These forecasts assume council tax increases in line with the government's expectations, where the council tax core referendum limit is 2.99% and the adult social care precept powers offer an additional 2% next year. The clear expectation from government is that these increases are applied, as these are factored into the core spending power figures mentioned earlier. As we've heard, the strong recommendation from our Section 151 officer is that the full council tax increases are taken. Assuming that council increases the council tax by the maximum permissible without a referendum, and that the updated savings proposals are ultimately taken and delivered, then the budget shortfall next year will be 6.45 million, rising to 48.2 million over the 4-year planning period. The cost estimates beyond next year are more indicative and will undoubtedly change as we move into the MTFP planning period, and as I previously said, there's significant uncertainty over the funding settlements beyond 24-25, and both of these factors could materially change the medium-term forecasts. We will therefore have to be flexible in our approach in terms of planning for the next 4 financial years so that we can continue to support residents in County Durham in the best way we can. Work has already started on developing options to address these challenges so that we can consider what further savings will be required in 25-26 and beyond, and we will need to consider these in the summer. This will require some very difficult decisions to be made, and these may well impact on frontline service delivery, as is the case across many other local authorities at this time. We have no choice, though, but to grasp this nettle and make those tough decisions, as the alternative would lead to a Section 114 position, something we simply cannot countenance. Next month, we will need to make the final decisions on what council tax strategy we will recommend to Council on 28th of February, where budget and council tax setting will happen. A 4.99% increase in our council tax next year represents an increase of around £1.15 a week for the majority of households across the county who live in Band A properties, and those on low incomes, remember, are currently fully protected through our local council tax reduction scheme. Government are clearly expecting local councils such as ourselves to increase council tax to help fund local services and in particular social care, and we will need to carefully consider this against the need to set a balanced budget next year, as well as considering the financial forecasts for future years that are set out in the report. While we are faced with using 6.45 million out of our MTFP support reserve to balance the budget next year, continuing to utilise such sums is simply not sustainable or affordable. Put simply, once the reserves have gone, they have gone. Underpinning the budget indefinitely from reserves is not, therefore, a strategy we can subscribe to. However, utilising the MTFP reserve next year will buy us some time to develop proposals that will minimise as far as possible the impact on frontline service delivery and help us balance the budget on a more sustainable position from 25-26 onwards as we develop more savings proposals. Finally, I'd like to conclude by welcoming the updates made to the Section 13A policy on the back of the policy decisions we took in November on the long-term empty property premiums. And with that, Chair, I'm happy to move the report and the recommendations as set in paragraph 42A to J.
Thanks, Richard. Can I also thank our officers for the work undertaken to prepare the MTFP 14 update report we are considering here today, and Councillor Bell and others for their contributions. To reiterate, we are not setting our budgets for next year today. Final decisions on that and on council tax increases will be a job for County Council on the 28th of February. This report builds on the information we considered in July and October and updates our financial forecasts for next year and beyond as we prepare for the budget setting meeting next month. Importantly, it includes a very comprehensive overview of the consultation feedback on the budget strategy and savings proposals that were set out in the July and October reports. As Paul has identified, there are a number of necessary revisions to our previous medium-term financial planning assumptions, building in updated forecasts for pay and price inflation and other unavoidable budget pressures. In addition to the outcomes of the local government finance settlement published just before Christmas, following the autumn statement published in mid-November. Having been at the CCN conference in November, where the Secretary of State for Levelling Up Housing and Communities alluded to some good news coming our way in the autumn statement and local government finance settlement, in line with the significant lobbying that had taken place, it was very disappointing, to say the least, that there was no new money made available and a blow that in fact our grant settlement was worse than had been previously forecast. This has made the challenge in terms of next year's budget and our MTMFP forecasts, both revenue and capital, all the more challenging. The scale of the challenges we face in terms of the unavoidable cost pressures we are experiencing, from inflationary increases in pay, waste and transport contracts, from the impact of national living wage increases, and from enduring cost and demographic pressures in our looked after children and in our home to school transport budgets, should not be understated. We are challenged by our inherent low tax raising capacity as a council and have an underlying inability to balance our budgets because of this, and a continued reliance on sufficient additional government funding being made available each year just to stand still. As has been said, the uncertainty over the funding we will receive beyond 25-26 is a real concern. Our MTFP forecasts at this stage do not factor in any loss of government grant in 25-26 and beyond, which is a distinct possibility. The update forecasts show that even if we maximise our council tax raising powers over the next 4 years, which the government expect us to do so, and deliver all the savings proposals set out in this report, we still have a £42 million shortfall to bridge over the next 4 years, which has been stated 6.447 million of this falls into next year. None of the proposals we consulted on have been withdrawn at this stage, and the report includes some additional savings proposals in resources and neighbourhoods and climate change. The 6.447 million deficit will need to be drawn from reserves in order to set a balanced budget next year, and clearly this is not a sustainable position to be in and can only be accommodated on a short-term basis. Increasing the council tax is a decision that should not be taken lightly. However, not increasing council tax is simply not a sustainable or prudent strategy to adopt and would not be in line with the government's expectations or the advice from our Section 151 officer. If we don't increase council tax, our 2024-25 budget and medium-term financial planning position will be much worse. In the absence of more funding being made available by government, it effectively becomes a binary choice of implementing council tax increases versus increasing the cuts to vital public services. It is important to recognise that those on low incomes in County Durham are afforded significant protection through access of our council tax reduction scheme, and I am delighted that County Council endorsed the continuation of our scheme into next year, which, unlike virtually every other council in the country, does not seek to limit or cap the level of support working-age households can receive. It is more important than ever that we have a well-managed medium-term financial planning process and that we plan for the worst whilst hoping for the best. Many authorities have fallen foul of not planning sufficiently well ahead, or not taking the tough decisions on council tax and on savings and using reserves to unsustainable levels. This is not something that we will do. With that, and acknowledging the work that has been undertaken to review the Section 13A policy, which is appended and requires Cabinet approval, I would ask Cabinet to note the report and agree the recommendations set out in paragraph 42. Is there anyone else wishing to speak to the report today? Okay, can we agree the report and its recommendations, please? Agreed. Okay, I can confirm that the recommendations are agreed. Move on to item 5, the concessionary fares budget. Can I ask Amy Horhoff, Corporate Director of Regeneration, Economy and Growth, to present the report, please?
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, everybody. Bus operators have not been able to sustain the pre-pandemic levels of commercially viable services, largely due to the impact of reduced passenger numbers and increased costs. This combined effect of reduced revenue and higher cost causes the risk to local services. As part of the Council's commitment to support public transport, this report seeks approval for 2 important recommendations. Firstly, that the forecast underspend in the English National Concessionary Travel Scheme, or ENCTS, during the period 24-25 be redirected to support local bus services. And secondly, to maintain the same practice in connection with underspends in the ENCTS that are expected to continue in the medium term. Travel under this scheme has remained significantly below pre-pandemic levels, and this means that the council reimbursement to operators is therefore also proportionately reduced. In recognising the importance of a viable bus network across the county, our Cabinet has previously agreed to redirect the underspend of the ENCTS budget and to redirect funding to local bus services in order to support the connectivity to our local community. This report therefore seeks approval to continue with this approach and maintain the same practice in the medium term. This is with a focus to supporting and protecting key connectivity for our communities for public transport. Chair, that concludes my report and the detailed recommendations are set out in section 11. Thank you.
Thanks, Amy. Can I invite Councillor Elizabeth Scott, Cabinet Portfolio Holder for Economy and Partnerships, to move the report, please?
Thank you, Chair. As portfolio holder responsible for transport, I am acutely aware of the problems that continue to impact bus services across the county as a consequence of the coronavirus pandemic. The huge reductions in patronage and changes in travel demands continue to place great strain on the sector. Through commendable partnership work between council officers and the local bus operators, we've been able to maintain a viable network which was so important for the residents of County Durham. This has been feasible as Cabinet have agreed to ensure that underspend in one council budget area is utilised to support the wider network. We know that bus services are a lifeline to many residents in County Durham, helping them get to and from their places of work, schools or colleges, and enable them to access essential services. That's why we've devised this proposal to support bus companies to keep running, which may be at risk of being cut. I'm therefore happy to propose the recommendations as set out in the report.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Can I invite Councillor Mark Wilkes, Cabinet Portfolio Holder for Neighbourhoods and Climate Change, to second the report?
Thanks, Chair. I fully support the aims set out in this report. Local bus services are vital in getting our local residents to work, to school and to access essential services. Since COVID, bus services have reduced despite additional government funding. The number of people using free bus passes has fallen just as the number of paying passengers has too. With this report, we are ensuring that every penny of the funding we're provided with is used to go back into bus services. And I would ask all bus companies operating in the county to do all they can to ensure that our bus services are operating efficiently and to bring back as many services as they financially can manage to do. After all, we the taxpayer are providing significant subsidy to these companies, and all too often we're told services are not to the standards the public expect. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Mark. Is there anyone else wishing to speak to the report? Okay. Can we agree the report and its recommendations? Agreed. Okay, I can confirm the recommendations are agreed. Move on to item 6, Adult Social Care Assessment Framework, Self-Assessment. Can I ask Jane Robinson, Corporate Director of Adult and Health Services, to present the report, please?
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everybody. This report relates to the Adult Social Care Self-Assessment document, which will be required by the Care Quality Commission as part of the assessment of Durham County Council's adult social care. In December 2021, the government released the white paper, People at the Heart of Care, which announced plans for a reintroduction of external assessment by an independent external regulatory body, such as the Care Quality Commission. In April 2022, the Health and Care Act came into force, and on the 1st of April 23, the Care Quality Commission's regulatory powers came into effect. Guidance released by the Local Government Association and the Association of Directors of Adult Social Services reinforced the best practice methodology to produce a self-assessment document, and this is guidance that we have followed in producing our own self-assessment. Work that's been undertaken to develop the self-assessment document is outlined at paragraph 15 and includes extensive survey activity undertaken throughout the course of last year. The self-assessment has been written around 3 sections, which is in line with the standard format provided, and you can see more details in paragraphs 18 to 22. For the self-assessment document, we used a comprehensive collaborative process, the content oversight being through the principal social worker. All referenced evidence is linked within the self-assessment library, which is quality checked by senior leaders in this service. The self-assessment will be reviewed annually. Paragraph 27 shows the key headlines from the self-assessment document, which includes development of quality statements, work around market intelligence, joint management working, transitions, work with public health, voluntary and community sector partners, workforce, sickness absence rates, and the adult and health services workforce development strategy. The table in point 28 is a summary of our key strengths and areas for improvement. The overview and summary of the finalised self-assessment document is available in Appendix 2, and the full self-assessment document is available at Appendix 3. In conclusion, a robust process has been undertaken to develop our self-assessment in line with current best practice methodology, and significant work continues to be undertaken in preparation for the Care Quality Commission assessment process. Cabinet is recommended to note the self-assessment, which will be refreshed annually. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Jane. Can I invite Councillor Chris Hood, Cabinet Portfolio Holder for Adult and Health Services, to speak to the report, please?
Thank you, Chair. It's clear from the report that an effective process has been undertaken to develop the self-assessment which is required by the CQC. As outlined in this report, significant work has been undertaken in preparation for the self-assessment document. This includes a robust governance system and engagement work with Cabinet members, service users, carers, staff, members, leaders, partners and stakeholders. I ask that Cabinet note the self-assessment document, which will be submitted once Durham County Council's adult social care are called for their assessment. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Chris. As the report's for noting, it doesn't require a formal seconding, but is there anyone else wishes to speak to the report? Okay, in that case, can Cabinet note the report?
Agreed.
Thank you. Item 7 is creation of a County Durham Culture Trust. Can I ask Amy Harhoff, Corporate Director of Regeneration, Economy and Growth, to present the report, please?
Thank you, Chair. This report provides an assessment of the benefits of establishing a charitable trust to support the county's ambitions for culture-led regeneration, and seeks approval from the Cabinet to progress with an application to the Charity Commission to establish a charitable incorporated organisation, or CIO, to be known as the County Durham Culture Trust. This proposal supports our broader ambition as a county of culture and builds on our success as being shortlisted to be City of Culture 2025. The report recommends the use of just over £70,000 from Council financial reserves to cover the costs associated with the establishment of the proposed Culture Trust, and to delegate the appointment of an appropriate senior officer as Durham County Council's first nominated charity trustee, alongside oversight of the development of a transparent and open recruitment process for 2 further independent trustees for the inception of the trust. The report provides an update on the development of a comprehensive fundraising strategy for the Durham Light Infantry Museum and Art Gallery, in line with the recommendations agreed by the Cabinet in March 2022. The extension and reopening of the former museum and art gallery requires a robust and achievable business plan supported by a realistic fundraising strategy with the key fundraising goals, priorities and opportunities. This strategy could also support the delivery and impact of the Council's wider cultural portfolio. The drafting of this strategy has identified some structural challenges that could constrain our achievement, particularly around fundraising. A number of options have been explored that could support our ambitions. As outlined in paragraph 20 of this report, 3 options have been considered and explored in detail. And they are, firstly, delivering all fundraising functions within the existing resource and as a local authority. Secondly, to work with an external partner to access funding not available to local authorities. And thirdly, to establish an independent charitable partner to support fundraising. I'll just draw the committee's attention to the key paragraphs in this report. So firstly, paragraphs 21 to 28 provide a detailed assessment of each fundraising option, including the key considerations, whilst paragraphs 29 to 32 set out the national context of fundraising with local authorities, including existing examples of where these approaches have been applied nationally. Further in the report, there is a clear assessment of the available charitable structures, and paragraphs 49 to 50 detail the key considerations for the Council in establishing a charitable partner. The report further explores the detail of establishing a CIO, including consideration of the scope of the proposed County Durham Culture Trust, with proposed charitable projects for the public benefit, which are set out further in this report. The financial details are set out, and whilst it is expected that the County Durham Culture Trust will bring in substantial income over the medium to long term, a new body will incur an initial start-up and year-one costs. However, it must be clear that once the trust is established, it would be responsible for its own running costs. Further key considerations and risks are set out in this report, and it should be noted that the recommendations of this report taken forward, the Council would have no legal or financial liability for the proposed trust, which would be independent of the Council. The report, which has been developed with advice from legal specialists working in the charities field and with support from expert fundraising consultants, identifies that the establishment of a charitable partner within a charitable incorporated organisation is the optimum option to ensure we maximise the capital and fundraising potential for Durham's cultural portfolio. I therefore propose the recommendations as outlined in paragraph 11 of this report. Thank you.
Thank you, Sammy. Can I invite Councillor Elizabeth Scott, Cabinet Portfolio Holder for Economy and Partnerships, to move the report, please?
Thank you, Chair. The recommendations outlined in this report demonstrate the clear commitment of Cabinet to deliver on the promises it has made to carefully consider the plans for the DLI collection and the former museum and its grounds, and to reopen the DLI Museum and Art Gallery with a sustainable and realistic business plan. Currently, the Council, as a local authority, is not eligible to receive funding from many of the trusts and foundations that support culture, art and heritage, nor is it able to realise tax benefits from individual donations, such as gift aid, which can increase the value of a donation by 25%. We are also not able to realise the tax benefits which charitable organisations are able to, nor to maximise opportunities for business. As a result, it is unlikely that the full fundraising potential of the DLI project could be realised and maximised within the Council's existing resource, and while acting as a local authority. Although the DLI project has been the initial driver for reviewing our ability to deliver a comprehensive fundraising strategy, the outputs of this work have identified a strategic need to look more widely across the fundraising potential and needs of the culture service. As the report makes clear, it is very common for local authorities to establish independent charities to help fundraise for the capital and revenue requirements of its cultural venues and programmes, and there are many examples of local authorities, both locally and nationally, working with an independent charitable organisation to support eligible aspects of their cultural programmes to deliver against shared priorities and to assess funds that local authorities on their own would otherwise be ineligible for. Therefore, the proposed County Durham Culture Trust has the potential to play an important role not only in providing a mechanism to access funds, grants and donations, but it also provides a mechanism to maximise the value of individual giving and philanthropic major donations through the gift aid scheme, and offer donors a tax-efficient option when making gifts in support of the proposed charity's work. Chair, with this in mind, I formally propose the recommendations in paragraph 11A to 11C of the report.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Can I invite Councillor James Rawlinson, Cabinet Portfolio Holder for Resources, Investments and Assets, to second the report, please?
Thank you, Chair. I would like to formally second the proposal of the Corporate Director for Regeneration, Economy and Partnerships and the Member for Economy and Partnerships. It is clear that the proposed County Durham Culture Trust as a culture partner would open up considerable potential to fundraise from myriad trusts and foundations, individuals and corporate supporters. It is also clear that without the proposed charity and using only the Council's current fundraising resource, experience in fundraising, eligibility, that will be extremely difficult to realise the significant fundraising potential and targets required to support the capital and revenue programmes and minimise the prudential borrowing and ongoing revenue commitment of the Council. I therefore second the recommendations in paragraph 11A to 11C of the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, James. Is there anyone else wishing to speak to the report? Yeah, Councillor Bell.
Thank you, Chair. We heard in item 4 the severe financial pressures that the Council faces, and the creation of this trust will enable significant additional monies to be levered into the Council. As an example of that, I'd refer Cabinet to Appendix 2, the Hampshire Culture Trust, which covers the county of Hampshire. Income in 21-22, £7.71 million, including £4.98 million from government grants, £176,000 from donations, which, as we've heard, people are more likely to give if they're able to gift aid, and £810,000 from trading activities. That's a significant amount of money going into that county that is not going from Hampshire County Council or Winchester City Council, and I look forward to the day when we're able to hear reports of a similar nature here in Durham.
Thanks, Richard. I'd also like to speak on this. By agreeing to create this trust today, we take the first steps in ensuring a sustainable future for our cultural assets without placing additional long-term financial commitments onto this local authority. Culture, tourism and the arts are not only beneficial for our residents, visitors and the economy here in County Durham, but are one of the priorities set by the new North East Combined Authority. This area could be a real game changer for both our county and the region as a whole. I fully endorse the creation of this trust. It demonstrates a forward-thinking authority with a desire to protect public finances, whilst at the same time providing an alternative option to invest and enhance in its facilities and wider offer in this sector. With that, I'd like to ask if anyone else would like to speak to the report, and if not, can we agree the report and its recommendations? Agreed. Okay, I can confirm that the recommendations have been agreed. Item 8 is any other business. I haven't been notified of any other business for the public part of the agenda. So if we move on to item 9, which is exclusion of the press and public, can I have a mover and seconder to a resolution to exclude the press and public, please?
Hi, Chair. Yes, I move that motion, please.
Thanks, Councillor Shield. And a seconder, please? Councillor Scott.